Hi guys, it's Andrea Blythe. Since I'm getting back into doing YouTube videos, I thought I'd do the Booktube and Authortube newbie tag. I'm combining them together, smushing them. For me, being a writer is intricately tied to also being a reader, so to me they're kind of meshed together. I didn't want to do all of the questions exactly as they were because there's some questions on each of the tags that are very similar. So basically how this is going to work is I'm going to talk about general channel questions first, and then I'm going to talk about the Booktube questions, and then I'll talk about the Authortube questions. To the best of my knowledge, the Booktube newbie tag was made by Brenda C, and the Authortube newbie tag was made by Jenna Streety. I am including the original questions down below in the description, along with the link to their channels so that you can support them as well. So, the first question is, how did you find out about book/Authortube? Basically, I found out about Booktube through Goodreads. I had seen other people posting about it, and Booktube led me to Authortube. I think it's a very cool way of just kind of pulling a community together around a single subject, and they happen to be subjects that I'm passionate about, so I'm having fun exploring the different videos and channels and seeing what people have to say about books and writing and that sort of thing. Question number 2 is, why did you start this channel? So, I actually started this channel 11 years ago. At the time, I had seen other people doing YouTube videos, and I just sort of hopped on and started exploring the process and messing around with it. I didn't really have any kind of focus for my channel. I would just kind of talk about a variety of different things. Everything from art to 3 things I randomly have in the house and all that kind of stuff. And then I took basically a 4-year gap between making videos. This happened for a variety of reasons, partially lack of access to technology, lack of time, social awkwardness, but basically I've been wanting to get back into it. I've been thinking about making videos for the past 4 years. I keep getting ideas in my head and then not doing them, and so I recently figured that now is the time to get back into it, and shaping my channel around Booktube and Authortube kind of helps provide a focus for me in a way that it hadn't before. So question number 3 is, what kinds of videos can you expect to find on your channel? I know I want to talk about books, kind of my favorite books, and books that I'm reading, and probably wrap-ups. You're probably not going to see any like super critical videos like me trashing on a book or that sort of thing. I don't have anything against those kind of videos. I think they're actually very entertaining when you get somebody who's very clever about how they basically diss a book that they didn't like. But I'm not very good at that sort of thing. And I also don't have time to be reading books that I don't like. I barely have time to read the books that I like. So I pretty much, if I don't like a book, I DNF out of it, and that's that. On the writing side, I'll probably talk about poetry, maybe some process videos, because I'm also in the process of putting together a novel and trying to write it. I'm drafting it right now. I'd also like to do some writing and book adjacent videos, like talking about storytelling in general, both in books, but also in television and gaming and that sort of thing. Maybe, I don't know. I'd like to try to do some video essays. I think that would be a really fun challenge. I'm not entirely 100% sure on what I want to do of all of this kind of yet. I'm still kind of figuring it out, and I'll figure it out as I go. Number 4, what challenges do you think starting a channel will be the hardest to overcome? As with my experience 4 years ago when I was making videos, consistency is a bit of a challenge for me because I work full-time and I'm balancing making videos with doing the actual writing thing. And actually, that's a more important challenge for me, is to not use the making of YouTube videos as a way to procrastinate from doing actual writing. I am very good at that. I love the blogging and the social media and all these different avenues, and they're an excellent way to procrastinate. So if I can just kind of find a balance between making videos and doing all the other blogging and projects and that I'm doing, and also keep up my writing goals, that would be amazing. And the 5th question in the general kind of channel questions is what are you most excited about? And I'm going to drop that to the end. I'm going to be contrary and break my own rules and just move that down to the end because I want to talk about that last. So let's move on to BookTube. Okay, the first BookTube question is, why do you love reading? Yeah, I've been reading since I was a kid. In fact, I would read so much that my mother has told me that she never worried about me as a child, never worried about me getting in trouble because she always knew I was off in a corner somewhere reading a book. I think when I first started reading, books were very much about escapism and disappearing into different worlds and seeing the stories and universes that could unfold. As I've become an adult, that is still true. I enjoy the pleasure of a good story that can take me out of my current life and all the stress and to-dos and tasks that need to be done. But at the same time, I've also kind of learned to appreciate the art and craft of storytelling itself. I love being transported by language, and I can fall in love with a book just because of the language itself and the poetry of the words involved. So question number 2 was, when did you start reading? Which I kind of already answered with question number 1. So I'm gonna move on. Question number 3, what book or series got you into reading? I remember loving the Dr. Seuss books as a kid. I remember loving, I can't think of the name right now, but Where the Sidewalk Ends, that collection of poetry by someone who I should know. God, why can't I think of his name? I really loved The Boxcar Children. That would actually be a fun kind of return to and read over again because I don't remember much about it. I just remember loving the story. I also remember really loving scary stories. Like Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark was one of my favorite books as a kid. And I remember this incident with my grandmother. We were walking around and we went to a garage sale and I picked up a book of scary stories and I was like, please, can I get this? And she was like, I don't know why you read these things when they give you nightmares. And that's a whole nother question in terms of why I like horror, even though it scares me. Maybe I'll talk about that in the future. But yeah, I've loved horror since I was a kid too, and fantasy and science fiction and all that good stuff. Next question. I stopped counting. I don't even know where I'm at number-wise anymore. Where do you read? I read everywhere. I bring a book with me to work every day. I usually read during my lunch break. When I'm at home, I'll read on the couch, on my bed. I read anywhere I possibly can. I always bring a book when I'm traveling. Actually, I always bring multiple books when I'm traveling because running out of books while you're on the road or wherever or in a hotel room is just unacceptable. It's not allowed. So what kind of books do you like to read? I love to read horror. I love to read science fiction and fantasy. I'll read any of those kind of speculative fiction kind of books. That's kind of my jam. I also read a ton of poetry. Partially this is because I do interviews with poets, both on my blog and for the New Books and Poetry podcast. And honestly, I'm pretty much happy to read anything. I read nonfiction books from time to time. I'll skip around in genres. I'll read classic stories. I have not been jumping outside my comfort zone as much anymore. However, it does happen from time to time. Let's get into the Authortube questions. So what genres do you write in? I pretty much write in the genres I like to read. I write fantasy and horror and sometimes science fiction. In terms of form, I write poetry, short stories. I'm working on a novel. I've tried my hand at screenplay writing. I'd also like to try game writing. I want to write all the things, basically. If there is a chance for me to write the thing, I want to try to write the thing. I want to see if I'm capable of writing the thing. I'm not always capable of writing the thing, but I want to try it. What is your preferred writing tense, point of view, and category of story? Writing tense and point of view, all of them. I've tried all of them. I've tried first person, third person, tried the infamous second person. I've even tried the royal we. I tend to do the more experimental stuff with the poetry. Basically, for me, the proper point of view or tense is based on what point of view or tense is meant to be the right one for the story. In terms of category, the novel I'm currently working on is a YA novel, but I also write adult fiction. Are you a plotter, a pantser, or a plantser. I'm okay with the first two words, but plantser is incredibly awkward, and my poetry brain just wants to reject it entirely. Okay, so for poetry, I very rarely plan out what I'm going to do. I kind of just let things flow. For fiction, it's much more complicated. I started out writing poetry. That's where I was able to successfully finish things. And then I've kind of gone into short stories and trying to work on the novel thing. So kind of going from short and compact to much, much longer works. As I've gotten into working on longer stuff, I have found that just kind of flying by the wind doesn't really work for me, and I need to plan it out a little bit more. However, I also haven't been successful on just fully outlining a thing and locking it in, because that doesn't really work for me either. So it's definitely the middle ground one. I don't even want to say the word because I don't like it, but I definitely kind of combine a little bit of rough outlining with just kind of letting the story get discovered as I go along. Are you a self-published, published, or yet to be published author? Kind of all of the above. I mean, I Kickstarter funded a chapbook of poetry that I published called Your Molten Heart, A Seed to Hatch. It was a series of erasure poems that I did and put together in this pretty little book. I have also published a collaborative chapbook of poetry called Every Girl Becomes the Wolf, which I co-wrote with Laura Madeline Wiseman, and it was published by Finishing Line Press. I think as I continue down the publishing path that what I'm aiming for is more of a traditional publication thing. I don't really want to have to do all the side things that are involved in self-publishing. Figuring out how to do the cover, figuring out how to edit it and find people to help me edit it to make sure it's all proofread, to figuring out how to market it and put it up on Amazon and all those things. All of that is a lot of work. What I want to be doing is writing and or doing other creative projects that I find pleasurable. So what publishing company, literary agent, and or printing company are you represented by or use? If you're not yet published, what is your dream publishing house and or literary agent? That is a long question. As I've said, I've worked with Finishing Line Press. I am currently working with Interstellar Flight Press on a project that will be coming out in the future. Interstellar Flight Press is phenomenal to work with so far. I'm loving every second of it. Dream publishers that I would love to work with. I would love to work with Tor Books, and they just came out with a horror imprint that I don't remember the name of right now, but I think they put out phenomenal novels and novellas, and it would be amazing to be able to work with them. I also really love Write Bloody Books, who publishes poetry books. They would be amazing to work with. When did you start writing? I feel like a lot of authors say they have been writing since they were kids. That wasn't really my focus when I was a kid. I really wanted to be an artist. I thought that I had this talent for drawing and painting, but then I hit high school and was going through a couple of different art classes, and I had this realization that I don't have the dedication to sit down and spend 4 months on a single painting, or sit down and do the little details that people do as artists. Like, I wasn't willing to put in the 1,000 hours or whatever it takes to really become a master of that craft. So I just kind of came to the realization and knowledge that becoming an artist was not going to be for me. However, at the same time I was figuring this out in high school, I was starting to realize that writing was a thing that I could pursue. By that point, I pretty much knew my path was to go into writing, that I wanted to write novels and stories and poetry and that sort of thing, and have that be my career and make a living off of it, hopefully. What was the first story you ever wrote? I'm not 100% sure it was the first story I ever wrote, but the one I remember most vividly was this little picture book that I made when I was probably in 2nd or 3rd grade, and it was a story of like a horse jumping over a fence, something like that. What authors have inspired your writing the most? I would say Toni Morrison is an influence, specifically her novel Beloved, which I've read 3 or 4 times. The richness of the language of her work and the depth of her story, man, she is just phenomenal. I would love to be able to achieve that same level of depth of language and story. She doesn't make it easy on you. You have to really focus when reading her work, but it's powerful work and it's just phenomenal. So I would love to be able to write like her. Who else is an influence? I mean, I feel like every writer that I read becomes an influence, in the sense that every time I read a good book, I learn something about writing and how stories are told. Sylvia Moreno Garcia comes to mind, Charlie Jane Anders, Anne Leckie, Meg Ellison. I could give a whole list of writers that I find inspiring and make me want to become a better writer. Do you schedule your writing sessions or simply get to writing whenever you have the time? I do try to fit writing into my daily routine, and I try to make it a priority. Like, I try to make choices in terms of, do I watch television or do I do writing? One of the things I've done is to try to schedule myself so that I get to work half an hour early so I can spend that half an hour doing writing stuff. It doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes I don't have the energy to do it, but basically I try to squeeze it in. Do you type on a computer, typewriter, write everything by hand, or use a blend of those? And where do you write in general? I would say at this point, I pretty much do the vast majority of my writing on the computer, especially drafting. I can pound away at the keys and allows me a free flow of my thoughts at a pace that keeps up with my thoughts. And where do I write? I write at the dining room table because that is the only space that's actually desk-like in my entire apartment. I also write at the office quite a bit, and if I need a change of pace, I'll go to a cafe or sometimes even the library to kind of find some space to write that doesn't have the distractions that like being at home might have. Okay, so that was all the writing questions, and so the last question is what you're most excited about this new channel. I am excited about the opportunity for meeting with and connecting with book lovers and writers. I love having opportunities of being able to have interesting conversations with people about writing and books because I love them, and I love talking with people who also love them and diving into why we love them and what we don't love about them and what we think about the industry. I'm hoping very much that I get to have more of those kinds of conversations through this channel. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for spending this time listening to me answer all these questions. I appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, please like, comment, or subscribe. And other than that, I hope you're all loving life. Bye. See you in the next video.